Hey, it's Emily, and I just got back from Southeast Game Exchange, which is touted as one of the largest retro gaming conventions here in the US, located in Greenville, South Carolina. And so I flew all the way from California over to Greenville in order to buy some retro games. And I wanted to share a little bit about my experience today, as well as all of the pickups that I found, and whether or not it was worth flying across the country to go retro game shopping. So a little background story before we get into all of these retro game pickups, and let me explain why I decided to fly across the country in order to buy retro games. And I heard about Siege through many YouTubers because this is a pretty big event that a lot of YouTubers go to, and I decided to put my name into the pool when they are asking for content creators who are interested in attending Siege this year, just to see what would happen. And they decided to, make me a special guest for some reason. It doesn't mean that much other than I get the special guest badge and my picture is in the event guide here. And I also had some sort of meet and greet, which I'll talk about the details for that a little bit later. And outside of buying retro games, which again, I'll kind of get into whether or not it was worth flying across the country in order to do this, I really wanted to look for some sort of outlet to help promote our podcast, the JRPG Pursuit. And so both of my podcast co-hosts and I all decided just to hitch a ride to Greenville and also host a panel there to help a little bit promote the podcast and just kind of find something fun to do this summer. And now after everything, I could safely say that Siege was a ton of fun this year, and I'm really glad I went. And I think a lot of the pickups that I got and the deals I got was definitely worth it. Now, despite getting a bunch of great game deals, when you look at the numbers financially, flying across the country, staying multiple nights at a hotel, and all the food and other travel expenses, of course, it's not going to be the cheapest way to go retro game shopping. I'm well aware of that, and I knew that prior to going. But I can safely say that attending Siege was a ton of fun, and I'm really glad I went. Not only to pick up some really cool games in person, but also have a chance to hang out with my podcast co-hosts who live in Chicago, so I never see them except online when we film our weekly podcast, and also meeting a lot of other great YouTubers in person for the first time. So it was a lot of fun socially, and I just kind of considered it a vacation with some retro game shopping. And it was also an awesome opportunity to meet with some fans of the channel and get to talk with them, and also sign, surprisingly, some copies of Trails for them, which I was, again, kind of taken back by that a few people mentioned that I helped them get into the franchise. So that was very humbling, and I'm glad that more people are getting into Trails because it's definitely a very beloved and cherished series for me. But yeah, overall Siege I thought was really cool this year, and I'm really glad I went, and definitely something I would consider going to in future years. Now on to the pickups and share what I bought and for roughly how much, because while all these I think have price tags on them, I was able to do some bundle deals to get them a little bit lower. And to start off with, I will say one of the coolest things about Siege are definitely the vendor prices. For some reason, I guess in the South, video games are just not as expensive as, of course, California and other parts of the country. So I was very pleasantly surprised at the base prices for a lot of these games, and also how many vendors were just willing to cut you a deal if you bought a couple games at their booth. They're able to do a nice little bundle deal for you. So I basically bought games from, 4 different consoles, or I guess technically 5. But I think I've mentioned this before, that when it comes to retro games, I'm really trying to focus on rebuilding and building up my PS2 collection, because that was my first home console ever. And there's just so many great RPGs and other games that I never had really an opportunity to play. And I also wanted to buy back some games that were either traded at GameStop or that I rented back in the day. So I was able to do both of that this trip. And I also really wanted to build up more of my handheld gaming collection, specifically with the Game Boy and Game Boy Advance. And there are a cool number of titles that I managed to pick up in person, because I think especially for handheld games and those cartridges, it's nice to have look at those in person and kind of know they're legit or not. But I guess I'll order this by console and start with the PS2 games, because I guess this was technically the first thing that I bought at Siege. They started on Friday. And the first one is Dragon Quest VIII. And I have this on the 3DS, but there's something about the original PS2 copy that I just really wanted to own. And another kind of cool thing about it is inside there is a Final Fantasy 12 disc demo. And for those who may not know, Final Fantasy 12 is one of my favorite Final Fantasies because it was my first on the PS2. So it's cool to have that here. And of course, the full colored manual for Dragon Quest VIII. But Dragon Quest VIII is one of the best games in the franchise, and it's one that I could see definitely Square Enix remastering at some point, but I feel like they're really focusing on the earlier Dragon Quest titles, and I could see maybe some of the DS games getting remastered prior to maybe 8 coming out again, because they did have that 3DS release. There's definitely, I think, something unique about this original version that's not on the 3DS, especially with the orchestral music and some other things that be cool to, I think, play through on the original version than just on the 3DS. So very happy to grab that. And so the price tag here says it was $26, but I actually bundled this with another heavy hitter on the PS2, Xenosaga 2, or Episode 2 here, which also has a price tag of $45. But I was able to bundle both of these for $65 together at a booth, which was, I think, very fair price to pay for these. And I picked up the first episode of Xenosaga at Midwest Gaming Classic last April. So I was really happy to get a very clean copy of the second episode here. Like, it looks pristine. Everything's so nice. It has the 2 discs here, as well as a nice crisp and colored manual. I know this is considered the lesser of the entire Xenosaga trilogy, but someday I'm going to be playing through these because of just how much I love the Xeno franchise, and especially the Xenoblade games. And I really like Cosmos as a character from what I've seen of her. She was featured as a blade in Xenoblade Chronicles 2. Definitely one of the best blades you could pull, though her, I think, chance was the lowest. It would be interesting if Bandai Namco does a remaster of this at some point, especially with how they ended the Future Redeemed DLC for Xenoblade Chronicles 3. So I'm very excited just to see more of Xeno come out for us, but very nice to have this copy. I don't know if I'll ever be able to buy the 3rd episode, because that goes for a lot of money, especially if you get the lenticular cover version, but maybe someday it'll happen. I just don't see that happening anytime soon, because most of the games that I really try to seek out, especially when it comes to retro, are on the lower end when it comes to the pricing scale. I'm not at the stage yet because I only really just started building more of my retro gaming collection that I need to pay for some really heavy hitters. So I've been putting those off and just focusing on some really great games that are not that expensive, especially if you compare them to modern day prices. Now for some more JRPGs that I picked up on the PS2. This first one is Dawn of Mana. And this is also a complete box. Came in this little sleeve, so let me open that up. And it was priced for $25 before a bundle. And it has the disc here, as well as a nice manual. And the Mana games are ones that I've really been meaning to play more. I've only played a little bit of Trials of Mana, I think one of the first playthroughs with a couple of the characters there. And that was the remake, of course, on the Switch. And I've been wanting to play Visions of Mana, the newest entry in the Mana series, and of course the earlier ones that they just look like fun action RPGs. So glad to have included this one. And with that, I also picked up Grandia 2. And I actually have the remaster collection on the PS4 of both Grandia 1 and 2. But kind of like, I guess, the same concept with Dragon Quest VIII on the PS2, I wanted the original version of Grandia 2, just because of its, I guess, history in JRPGs and just owning the original copy. I think it's just something special. let's open this up. This was priced at $20. And I think I may have went in on a bundle with a friend at the convention, which is something I also recommend you consider doing if you go with people, as a way to kind of help negotiate for better bundle deals when you give them a larger stack of games. And I want to say the bundle, I had at least $5 off. I don't quite remember how much it ended up being altogether. And this piece of plastic is being stubborn. So let me rip it off. Just to see what it looks like inside. And it's, I think, again, just interesting to see this part of history of games, of how they used to sell for, and kind of what images they put on the disc and the manual. It's interesting, it's all the same for Grandia 2 here, and also they included the Japanese name on the North American copy. So like these little details you don't really get with some of these remastered collections, and I'm definitely willing to buy original versions, especially if they're under $40, I would say, for some of these heavy hitter JRPGs that were released on the PS2. So glad to have this, though I do see myself probably playing the remastered version before this one, just because of some of the quality of life enhancements. I feel like it might be worth playing through first, and then maybe seeing how it was originally, just as a kind of exercise, I think would be interesting. But again, I just kind of wanted to have this on the shelf as a way to memorialize Grandia, which is, I think, one of the pivotal games that came out on the PS2 for JRPGs back in the day. This next game is another one that I got for a bundled price. I don't quite remember how much I got off of the $20 price tag. I want to say at least $3 for a bundle, maybe $2. But this is The Lord of the Rings, The Third Age. And this is also considered one of the first Western JRPGs that were released by, in this case, EA Games. And what's interesting is they took the Lord of the Rings characters, but they kind of made this play like Final Fantasy X. So I love Lord of the Rings, and even here on the back it says the most exciting RPG since Final Fantasy, in quotes. And so just having the original copies of these and kind of just seeing the history of JRPGs is one of the reasons why I think retro games collecting is just so cool. And you can see a little bit of what it looks like inside here. And it has more of a black and white manual, excluding the cover here. But again, I think this is really cool and definitely a game I do want to play, since it has one of my favorite IPs and also plays like a JRPG. So very, very cool there. And then the last PS2 game I managed to get was not a JRPG, but this was one that I wanted to rebuy because I actually own the disc of this. And unfortunately, the disc was really scratched. And I remember trying to replay it years ago and it's not working. So finally got a nice copy of Ratchet Deadlocked. So this is one of the Ratchet and Clank games. I know it says a price of $20 here, but I believe I got this for $15. And has both the disc as well as the manual. And the Ratchet and Clank series is one of my most influential games on the PS2, along with Jak and Daxter when it comes to the 3D kind of action platformers. And there's just something so charming about these games that I really like. And I know when people think about platforming or 3D platformer games, people automatically think of Mario. But really, my first ever encounter of 3D platformers were on the PS2 with games like Ratchet and Clank. And they just hold such a special place for me, I would say, in my history of games. And I still love playing them today. I really enjoyed Rift Apart that came out on the PS5. And I love to revisit Deadlocked here at some point, because I do remember just enjoying all the Ratchet and Clank games on the PS2. But yeah, finally have the stack of games and my ever-growing PS2 collection that is filling out the shelf down there. Might need to bleed into the right side there that has my solo Switch 2 game, as well as some steel books, but I'll have to reorganize things to have it all fit nicely. But I'm really happy with, again, how my PS2 collection is shaping up, and I'm looking forward to expanding it even more in whatever convention I go to next. But enough for the PS2. I guess next I will go to my other PlayStation pickup, which is more of a handheld PlayStation pickup on the PSP. So my PSP collection, which I think you could also see kind of in the frame here. I don't have too many PSP games because when it came to that era, I didn't really have a DS or a PSP, and I kind of skipped to the 3DS back when I was in grad school. So I've been wanting to revisit more PSP games because this was an era of so many great tactical RPGs, as well as just other RPGs in general. And it also had one of my favorite games of all time released on here, which I'll get into. But I guess I picked up 3 different PSP games this time around, and slowly growing this collection. The first one was, I guess, also bought from that vendor that had the sleeved games, is Tales of the World Radiant Mythology. The Tales of series is one that I've been meaning to get into. I keep collecting their games. At some point, I'll play them. I do have Tales of Vesperia I was thinking of streaming at some point, maybe after my streaming sessions for Sea of Stars. That might be fun. But this is one that I don't see too often online for the PSP, at least complete in box and everything. So it was nice to have this added to the collection, especially because you can only really play this on the PSP. It's possible that Bandai Namco, with all of their Tales of remasters, might bring this to modern consoles, but I don't think this is the highest priority for them. So I figured this would be a safe bet to get on the PSP at this time. I know that price said $25, but I want to say after the whole bundle and everything, I may have knocked off a few other extra dollars on it, which is nice for the convention because there's no sales tax, there's no shipping prices, of course. You get to see the condition in person. That's why I really do like buying games at these retro gaming conventions. And most of the sellers make sure that everything's nice and clean, and they check the quality of the disc and things like that when factoring their prices. So it's nice to, have some, I guess, more reassurance. I feel a bit safer sometimes buying from these vendors here at conventions in person than online, which sometimes things could be a little bit misleading when you see some listings. Now, these next 2 games were ones that I also bundled together. The first one being Crisis Core, Final Fantasy VII. I played the Crisis Core Reunion game on the PS5 last year, I believe. Yeah, I think it was last year. And I really loved it, and I wanted to see what the original played like because Zach just became such a special character for me, and I wanted to see him in his original form here. And I'm always really impressed with Square Enix's ability to make really interesting graphics on handheld devices. It's just something that I think is really cool that they've done, especially with a lot of the Kingdom Hearts games and some of these Final Fantasy handheld games. So I just want to see what this looks like on a PSP screen because it is such an iconic game for this era. And to have it all in here, it has a nice, first of all, cover here as well. I know there is a Best Buy variant that has a hollow cover, which might also be cool to get someday just for collecting purposes, but I'm happy to have this with the standard edition. I know the price is as $15, but I was able to bundle this for one of the biggest prizes that I got at the convention this year, and that is the Legend of Heroes Trails in the Sky, which also has a $90 sticker. Kind of forgetting how much I bundled them for, but I definitely knocked off like at least $10 or something on it. For both of them. And I know this is a little bit high when it comes to this game in general. It's hard to find, I would say, even the standard version of Trails in the Sky for the PSP at a low price. And I have a feeling after the remake comes out, the original PSP version that came out here in North America is not going to, I think, go down in price because they're going to be 2 different games. Something I've, I guess, been somewhat observing when it comes to a lot of these remasters and remakes and how they influence the retro game market is if you have a full-on remake that's totally different from the original, it usually doesn't influence the price of the retro version that much. And I have a feeling when more people play the remake for Trails in the Sky this fall, a lot of people are going to get into the franchise and want to buy the original because there's just something very charming about this original version. And I'm really glad to have a copy of it. I know, of course, there is that whole Xseed collector's edition that comes in a nice cardboard box. I actually didn't feel like I needed to own that because a lot of the things that were included in that box I have in other things, like in art books and things like that, and larger soundtracks and whatnot. And with the remake, I'm actually buying so many different editions. I didn't go for the limited run one because I thought that version was kind of lame. Their collector's edition, I went with the steelbook with the slipcase, but I actually ended up buying the pin box, kind of ultimate bracer box that comes with an actual orb mint that you could customize with different quartz, which looks really cool. And I also bought the huge deluxe Japanese version, which comes with a lot of goodies that I'll share once that comes in. So I was happy to have this PSP game here in physical form as the original to go with all my other Trails stuff. So I was very happy to find this because for some reason, I've noticed this both with Siege as well as Midwest Gaming Classic. It's hard to find PSP games for some reason. I wonder if it's because these haven't been moving that much. So maybe they're a little bit less popular for people to seek out. So vendors don't really bring them with them, or maybe some other reason. But I'm really, again, happy to finally have this in my collection. Now, the last few games I have here are all Game Boy related games, mostly Game Boy Color, but I also have an original Game Boy and two Game Boy Advance games. So I guess I'll go from oldest to least old, starting with the Pokemon trading card game. So this is one that I actually owned back in the day. And I think my brother and I, we traded this into GameStop after a while because that was how you were able to, as kids, have new game experiences if you were to sell your old games. And when it comes to the Pokemon TCG, I don't collect the cards at all. There was a vendor who had one of those like insert a coin and you get some like stickers or cards that come out. So I had 50 cents that I did, and I had my first ever Pokemon cards that I ever got. Prior to when I was a kid, my parents didn't believe in buying card games that come in those booster packs because they thought it was a waste of money, which in some respects it is, unless you look at some of the prices on the market now. But I was always just given the common duplicates that my friends had. So those were the only Pokemon cards I really ever owned. So nothing that was, you know, a rare card or anything like that. So it's kind of cool to get some shiny cards. I know they're not real shiny, but they have that, you know, the reverse holo or something, whatever they're called. I'm not a Pokemon TCG collector, so I don't know the jargon. But I got a Bisharp one and a Houndstone and an Inkay. And I'm pretty sure these are pretty common rares. But it's just cool to have some Pokemon cards. I might try to buy some packs at some point, but I don't know. The market is crazy for those, and it's not something I want to delve into at all. But coming back to the trading card game on the Game Boy, I did like playing this game and learning a little bit how the card game worked. But again, I just never really played the card game ever in person. So it was nice to, I guess, have this. On the back here, it was priced at $30, but I'm pretty sure I bundled it with this next game here. Yeah, Sabrina, the animated series, Spooked. And this is the start of a lot of licensed games that I decided to buy this trip for the Game Boy Color. But I was able to bundle both of these. I forget for how much, but this was also priced at $17 on the back. And I'm pretty sure I knocked off like, I would say at least $8 or $10 for both of them. So I was happy. And I wanted to, again, kind of make sure that the Game Boy games that I did buy on this trip were legit, of course. but also that they had nice labels on them. I don't really care too much for expensive cardboard, so I was not looking for any complete in box ones. I wasn't looking for the manual either. I just really wanted to have some loose Game Boy games just to play on my Game Boy Pocket. And all the licensed games that I picked up on this trip were IPs that I really liked, and I was just curious how their game played. They might not be very good games, or they might be really great games. It's kind of a gamble what you get. And so I wanted to, I guess, take that gamble and try them out because it's part of the fun, I would say, with how these games were back then. And so I'll play little clips of, I guess, the beginning of all these games just so you can see what they look like, especially on that nice Analog Pocket screen. But after the Sabrina one, I also got the 102 Dalmatians Puppies to the Rescue. And so I was a huge Dalmatians kid. And this is supposed to be a fun game. I think it's a platformer game, but I'll show a little clip of what it looks like in case I'm wrong there. But yeah, a lot of those Disney games, and again, just licensed games in general, were a lot of fun. And I think it's a good way to find really cheap but fun experiences, especially on these cartridges. Really happy to have snagged this one. I know it says $10, but I want to say I bundled it with something else to knock off an additional $1. I may have bundled it with the Scooby-Doo classic Creep Capers, which is not a platformer game. Actually, the person who was selling this at their booth let me test it out to see what type of game it was. And it's more of a point and click adventure game. And I think that just fits the whole Scooby-Doo style so well. And I'm really excited to actually play this because it looked really fun and it was so vivid. They had one of those backlit modded Game Boys that just made the screen just look so vibrant and beautiful. And then the last licensed Game Boy Color game I got was The Mummy Returns. And this was also priced at $10, but I want to say I knocked off $1 or maybe $2, depending how the bundle went. But yeah, I don't know how this one will play at all because this is definitely not animated in a licensed game. I have a feeling it's probably not very good, but I want to just try it because I do enjoy the Mummy movies or the Mummy Returns in this case, and just see how this goes. Now, the last two games I got were Game Boy Advance games. And while I did play a lot of my Indigo Game Boy Advance back in the day, I actually didn't play a lot of Game Boy Advance games on it. I mostly played a lot of Game Boy Color games on it. So there's quite a number of GBA games that I have my eye on and I want to collect. The first one was a cheap $5 one, and it is the Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. And this is not based off of the movie, but the book. So I'm very curious how this runs. I have a feeling it's not a very good game. That's probably why it was in the $5 bin, but it might surprise me. So that's kind of why I took the chance. And I was just kind of curious again, how this actually ran. I saw a few different images online and there's a lot of browns and kind of muddy colors. So it's not the most vibrant and beautiful game, but I have a feeling there's some sort of charm that I'll find at least interesting when I get around to playing it. But the other kind of big highlight for this convention that I was really trying to seek out a physical game of is the second Fire Emblem game that came out here in North America, Fire Emblem The Sacred Stones. And so I got this for $45. And I saw this game a lot on the con floor. And what's interesting about a lot of conventions and vendors is you see an array of prices. So I saw $45 was, I think, the cheapest. This was listed as on the convention floor from what I saw from the vendors when I got to them. But I also saw this game going for like 50, 55, 60. So it's, I think, a good idea to shop around before you decide to buy a game. Unless you see something and you've already did the whole price charting thing, research before you go to a convention, that kind of tells you that maybe you should buy this right away because this game was priced right at price charting. So I didn't negotiate with the vendor at all. I just decided 45 was a price I was willing to pay and there was something else I could bundle with it. So I was really happy with this price and the condition of it overall. And I'm just happy to have a physical copy of this because this is one of the games or the earlier Fire Emblem games I haven't played fully yet. So I'm excited to get to this one and especially experience it on my Analog Pocket. But yeah, these are all of the games that I picked up. Briefly, I'm going to share some other things that I picked up as well. The first being this 3D print art. There were a lot of vendors actually with a lot of 3D print kind of sculptures and things, and also a lot of people selling dice if you're into D&D. But the 3D print sculpture that caught my eye was this Pokeball of my favorite Pokemon, Vulpix. And it was just so cute. I couldn't pass it up. You can find a lot of these online. I think a lot of these 3D print sculptures, people sell, I think, the blueprint, basically. I don't know what you call it in 3D printing. And so a lot of people make the same sort of item. And I thought that this was sculpted very nicely and how they went about the 3D print. And it was only $25, which was a price I was willing to pay. It'd be about the same, I think, if I ordered it from an Etsy seller, or probably more if you include shipping, depending where they ship it from, and tax and all that. But yeah, this will, I think, be a nice addition to the shelves back there. And it's nice to find a lot of fan art and things at these sort of conventions. I would say for Siege, there was fewer vendors of just merchandise in general. Most of them were just video game sellers, which was a lot different from Midwest Gaming Classic, which I noticed there were kind of fewer vendors selling just games. There definitely were there, but they were fewer than I was expecting for the size of the vendor hall in comparison to Siege, which the entire room or the hall was all the vendors basically, with a few different fan art or 3D print sculpt people. And then other thing I wanted to share before I end today was my friend and podcast co-host Brandon from Just the Gems recently came back from Japan, and he was very nice and gave me some things that he picked up while we met at Siege. So he kind of went wild with a lot of Trails merch, which we are both big Trails fans, and he found some acrylic stands of one of my favorite characters, Crow here. So he's in some butler outfit with glasses, so a very different look for Crow here. And he also found this acrylic art kind of print of him as well. And then he also got this big tapestry of one of the best new art that they have for Kai no Kaseki, or Trails Beyond the Horizon, that's coming out here in North America next year. And this features Trails of Cold Steel characters in the new Kai art. It looks beautiful. I don't know where I'm going to put it. I'll find somewhere. But I guess a funny story of how I had to transport this, because the flight I chose, because it was very cheap, did not have a carry-on. And so I was just going to this convention with my backpack as my personal item. And this was a little bit too long to fit in my backpack. So I brought a trench coat with me just for the plane and things, because it was too hot in Greenville, South Carolina this year to wear any sort of outerwear. But I had to hide this in my sleeve when I was going on the plane, just so that they wouldn't charge me extra for bringing on an extra item. So it was kind of a funny way how I had to store this and hide it away with me, but it made it here safely. And then he also got one of those blind box pins of various characters, and he happened to have pulled doubles of my other favorite character, Elaine here, on her little action pose. So that was very cool. And then he also knows I'm a big One Piece fan, so found this towel of Luffy. So I was very thankful for him for gifting me all these items and going out of his way to bring them to me in Greenville when we met up. But yeah, overall, I thought, again, Siege was such a fun time, and I think well worth traveling across the country to go to, even though if you want to compare costs, buying these retro games online would have been, of course, much cheaper, even if they were at more expensive prices, even if they were, I guess, above price charting prices, just given the price of the flights and all the hotel stuff. But again, I think paying a little bit extra for this experience was well worth it for me personally. So I definitely encourage those who have maybe any sort of convention in your local area or somewhere that you may have to drive or perhaps fly to. It might be something worth considering as like a little mini vacation to go to one of these events, because there's just nothing that you could really recreate when it comes to meeting people in person who like the same things you do. And it was really cool to connect with a lot of new people and meet up with some old friends as a way to kind of geek out over all retro games together. So it's definitely a great time. The panel we did as a podcast, and we had Tri from My Life in Gaming come on with us as well. It was a lot of fun. We're kind of just chatting about the impact of all the JRPG remasters that are coming out on the retro scene, and how does it kind of stack up to playing the original games versus a lot of these modern takes on these remasters and remakes. So that was a lot of fun. And again, meeting a lot of people, and trying out some of the barbecue in South Carolina. Just so many great memories that I'm really glad that I went out this year. And I'm looking forward to more retro game conventions in my future. I don't know. There's so many that I want to go to. If you guys have any favorite retro gaming convention, let me know of ones to, I guess, keep on my radar to see if those are also worth traveling to. And later in August, I'll be attending another convention. It's going to be more of an industry gaming convention, PAX West, but my podcast co-host and I, along with another podcast, are going to be doing a panel on there, and I have another cool announcement that I'll be sharing very soon, probably on the channel. But it should be a good time. I'm looking forward to it. I might make a vlog or some sort of video to talk about my experience there, as well as my first time ever at PAX West. We'll see what's in the cards. If you guys want to see that, let me know as well. And I wanted to give a quick thank you to all of my YouTube channel members. Thank you so much for the support. And I hope you guys have been enjoying all the videos and the live streams here. And also a very big thank you and shout out to my Orbment architects, Dr. God and Calix. Thank you so much for your support. Yeah, that's all for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Do you guys think it's worth traveling a long distance to a retro gaming convention? Let me know. And until my next video, bye guys.